seemed like the general theme of this month was wait until April for things to happen. But there are still a few things I have that I can talk about. So the first thing is just my general hormone situation. Well, nothing's really changed from last month. I'm still as manly as ever. Breaking out again, getting greasy everywhere. And just like the first time I went through this puberty, I'm having a very hard time sleeping. I still have no idea how I was able to pull a halfway decent grade out of my junior high school career. There would be so many nights where I just couldn't get to sleep until like 2 in the morning, and then I'd wake up at 6 in the morning. I was hoping to be done with that. Thankfully, it isn't that bad, but wow. I just find myself really tired, and when I'm not tired, I find myself insanely horny. And I really don't know what's worse at this point. I did have an interesting conversation with a friend. So, as I probably mentioned in the past, I'm in a fair bit of a few Discord groups, and sometimes I'll just sit in a voice chat and attempt to get a little voice practice in by just sitting in a conversation. And this one was really unique. I'm not sure how I got on the subject, but we started talking about Barbie movies. And this one friend was just kind of like, oh, were those movies just not allowed at your house? I did not have the heart to tell her that I was born male, and as such, things that were Barbie related were a bit more on the forbidden side of things. At least to some degree. It's weird because I do remember there were a few times when I was really young that I would be playing with the Barbie dolls, or even with my older sister, and nobody really batted an eye at it. But as I got older, that kind of stuff became a little bit more taboo, or maybe I'm the one that made it taboo, because even when I would be playing dolls with my cousin, I would be finding some way to make it seem a little more on the manly side of things. But regardless, though, it was a bit of a fun experience. I think back to this one recording. It was an interview with Christine Jorgensen, who I've talked about her several times at this point. And one of the stories is she is backstage with a whole lot of her female co-stars, and they're all talking about their childhood. And they're just like, oh, well, didn't you ever play with dolls? And she's just like, well, and then they're all just like, oh, right, yeah, I didn't even think about that. It's just the idea that she passed so well that people couldn't fathom the idea that she was born as a boy. And it was quite flattering that I was able to have a very similar experience myself. Another big thing as well was this conversation I had with my therapist. The question she posed to me is, how do you define femininity? Honestly, I was rather taken back by this question. I wasn't really sure how to answer it. But the more I think about it, it seems like what I define as feminine is what would have had me being called gay in the past. A really good example I can think of is being emotional. When a guy is happy, he has to be a little more reserved about it. So if he's about to see his favorite movie, he'd just be like, yeah, let's do this. But yet, as a girl, you can be a little more unrestrained. You can do that high-pitched squealing noise, like that. That is a very feminine thing, or at least that is something that I define as feminine. Maybe there's some people that define that as a bit more masculine. It is a very objective term, and I'm sure that there are different social circumstances where what is viewed as feminine for some would be seen as masculine for others. The more I thought about it as well, What I define as femininity is very different for myself as opposed to other people. I kind of hold myself to a high standard, but let me see if I can try to come up with a definition that I can give for this video, and, well, perhaps I'll open it up in the comments, because I feel like this could be a very interesting conversation. What does femininity mean to you? And if you want, what does masculinity mean to you? Because I'm going through the process of transitioning, I see it very much as a physical thing. There are certain feminine characteristics. Generally, I find men are very flat. Women have curves. Now, these are not like hard definitions by any means, but this is just the way I view it in others. And within myself, the way I view femininity is, well, I find that's kind of the epitome of femininity. In fact, that's how a lot of people seem to judge a person being more feminine and masculine, is how big these things are. Although men can have them, but they look different. So curves is definitely a big one. A lack of hair, at least for me anyway, which is especially annoying because the rise in my testosterone levels has made it a lot harder to deal with. It just seems like I have to shave a lot more in order for me to look what I consider feminine. And I'm not talking about just the face. I mean my arms and my legs and, well, the pits. Basically, if I could just remove every single item of hair that's not my eyebrows, my eyelashes, or this hair, I would be perfectly content. Because that's how I personally define femininity. And I guess maybe to some degree I define it that way in others, but there are so many people that come in so many different shapes and sizes that it's kind of hard to establish a general guideline. But that is how I see it in terms of the physical side of things. On the emotional side of things, whenever people say they're in touch with their feminine side, to me I would describe it as a lack of fear of saying they love you, that they care for you. Now, I feel like when it comes to the guy situation, it's a little harder to say because it seems like you say you care too much and, oh, what are you, gay or something? Occasionally, during like tough situations, you might get like a hug or something, but it seems to be the general consensus that men just basically have to take everything that's thrown at them and just keep a neutral face on them at all times. I am very happy to be out of that rat race, but I feel very sorry for people that are still caught up in the race. It is not healthy to keep things into yourself, even if that is a bit of a societal expectation. I could probably go on for this subject for a while, but really the main thing I want to note is that these are things that I observed. I do not claim to be an expert. I just claim to have, shall we say, played on both teams, and I know some of the strengths and weaknesses of both. And, well, if you've been watching these videos, you know which team I'm batting for at this point. But the other big thing I want to mention as well. A lot of you might have been hearing talk about this new animated series that came out known as X-Men 97. I had been meaning to check out the series that inspired this new animated series for quite some time. And I finally had the chance to do so, and wow. X-Men the animated series is fantastic. In a way, it kind of itches a bit of a nostalgia for me. I grew up in the early 2000s, and maybe there were a few reruns of some of those shows from the 90s at that time, but that particular animation style, it's not perfect by any means, but it is something that I remember growing up with a lot of. Another example I like to bring up is Sherlock Holmes in the 22nd century. I'll be amazed if anybody else has seen that show. But anyway, the thing that really stuck out to me is, even though there's a few dated references, like the famous "not," I find it is actually pretty relevant today. Maybe I'm just kind of reading too much into it, but I almost find the idea of mutants can be an allegory for coming out as part of the Rainbow Alliance. I remember watching this top 10 video a while ago that basically said how some of the famous comic book characters are based off of real people. And the big thing that stuck out to me was the fight between Charles Xavier and Magneto. Both were very much based on Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. I won't go too much into it, but if you know about the history of these two icons of the civil rights movement, you could probably see the parallels. But probably the scene that sticks out to me is they are about to head to the data collection agency to try to wipe out all the names on the mutant registry. And while they're doing so, they're talking about how they had to come out to their parents. That felt very relatable. And I also found it very interesting that the idea of being a mutant was something that, yes, they are born with, but it's not something you find out until you're in your teens. And I get the feeling that probably even in that mythos, there's probably some mutants that just came out that way and just always had the mutant powers. And the other big thing as well, going for that allegory sort of thing, was the introduction of the Murlocs, which I get the feeling must be a reference to H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. And it was very interesting because this group of people were also mutants, but unlike those in Charles Xavier Academy, they can't blend into society. They don't pass. They don't look human, and as such, they have to remain hidden. And I just found all that to be very relatable. But even outside of that, I really love the writing. It may be a kid's show, but it's not really talking down to the audience. It's more kind of built to an understanding that the kids either need to figure out what all this stuff means, or they might already know what it means. And the other big thing I love about the writing is the character of Beast. He is well read, and I'm actually able to pick up on some of the references that he has. In fact, even that was a very interesting arc. The idea that even though he has super strength, super intelligence, he still wants to go through the legal ways. He is waiting for his trial, even though he is definitely strong enough to be able to escape any prison that he is held in. He wants to do it the right way. And even after he is proven guilty, he doesn't raise a riot, he just goes along quietly. The scene that I personally love is he's reading Animal Farm by George Orwell inside of his cell. And the guards are just like, "Ooh, look at the mutant, he's so stupid. He's reading a book about animals. There must be some pretty pictures in there." And I just found that amazing because as I'm watching it, I'm going, they clearly have not read Animal Farm. So yeah, just like that topic of femininity and masculinity, I could probably go on about talking about both. So I'll just simply say, fantastic show. The animation is not perfect. In fact, there's like a few times where, say, a character is pushing a button, but the button is like here. But at the same time, I kind of appreciate that. It shows that it was drawn by humans instead of a computer, a machine, an artificial intelligence. Well, this video went on surprisingly longer than I thought, so I think I will end it there. Until next time, be yourself, no matter who that is.